Hello again and welcome to another Warhammer 40k Mordy and Glory video. So with the new Astra Militarum Codex coming out, we now have access to our very own Supreme Command unit, Lord Solar Leonatus. This guy is an absolutely fantastic unit that many Imperial Guard armies are going to want to take advantage of. However, I've seen a lot of people just chuck this guy into their list and expect it to dial up to 11. Unfortunately, this new character isn't that straightforward, and he actually does take a little bit of finesse to use properly. And so what I want to do with today's video is go through some golden rules that I've come up with for using the new Lord Solar model. The purpose of these golden rules is to help you get the most out of your shiny new Supreme Commander model and help you avoid some of the most common mistakes that people make when they include this guy in their lists. So without further ado, let's dive straight into today's episode. So the first golden rule that you've got to remember is the Lord Solar is not a combat beatstick. Sure, he's got a fairly impressive profile for a guard character. Hitting on 2s, that's pretty nice. 6 attacks, doozy. Strength 6, AP -3, 2 damage, that sounds pretty nice. For a guard character, that is good. For any other kind of Supreme Commander, that's a pretty weak combat profile. You cannot send this guy into combat and expect him to clean house. He can barely take down a unit of intercessors single-handedly. The Lord Solar is a leader character. He is not designed to be in combat smashing the enemy to pieces. What you want to be thinking about is, in an ideal situation, he will never get into combat. That combat profile he has is to get him out of a sticky situation. Now, this brings me on to the second golden rule of the Lord Solar. He is not an absolute unit. What I mean by this is he's not particularly tanky. He can't actually take very much damage. Now, you might be surprised to hear me say that, considering he does have 8 wounds, which is the most out of any of the guard characters. But what you've got to remember is he only has a 3+ armor save. That's right, the Supreme Commander of all of the Imperial Guard only has the same armor value as a tactical marine. Not particularly inspiring. Now, he does have a 4+ invulnerable save, which is quite nice, and he does halve the damage characteristic of any attacks that get through, but he does not have a wound cap. And so this lack of wound cap and this lack of a decent armor save, and the fact that he's only toughness 4, which means he's not particularly tough, means that he's actually a relatively fragile character. A decent volley of bolter fire from an intercessor squad could see this guy knocked down in short order. The point of these first 2 golden rules is to remind you that at the end of the day, this is a guard character. They need protecting and bubble wrapping, and like any good guard commander, he needs a solid screen to allow him to do his job properly. And these first 2 golden rules lead into the third golden rule, which is you've got to remember the Lord Solar is not like other factions' Supreme Commanders. He is not Morvenval, he is not Abaddon. Now, what I mean by that is he is not a completely self-contained unit that can take care of himself on the battlefield. As a guard commander, every single time that I play against Morvenval or Abaddon, it absolutely amazes me how well these models can look after themselves on the battlefield. It's not uncommon to see the likes of Abaddon be chucked on a flank of a game and just be launched at the enemy like an absolute missile, and for him to actually achieve that, get to the enemy and start hacking them to pieces. He is a fully self-contained unit on the battlefield. He can achieve anything he wants to. The Lord Solar isn't like that. If you put the Lord Solar unsupported on a flank and chuck him at the enemy, in one turn, he's going to be dead. Okay, he is not a self-contained unit that can look after himself on the battlefield. He requires support. And that is the most important thing to remember about the Lord Solar, because it leads me on to the next golden rule, which is probably the most important one that you need to take away. If this is the only thing that you remember from this video, the Lord Solar is a buffing character. I know the temptation is going to be there to use him as a heroic figure, leading from the front, charging the enemy down on his beautiful Age of Sigmar style horse, but that is not the way to use him. He is not a combat beatstick. He is not an absolute unit. He is not a self-contained Wunderwaffen. He is a buffing and support character. His whole role on the battlefield is to support your army and to make the units around him perform better. That is the same role that nearly all guard characters have. Okay, there's a reason he can do orders. There's a reason he can hand out full rerolls. There's a reason he has a big aura of reroll ones to hit, reroll ones to wound. His job is to support your army. His job is not to run around and be the hero. Now, speaking of rerolls, this brings me on to the next golden rule for using the Lord Solar, which is the main reason you are taking him is for access to his full reroll ability. The Lord Solar has an ability on his datasheet called the Lord Commander Solar. In your command phase, you can select one friendly Astra Militarum core, character, or battle tank unit within 6 inches of this model. Until the start of your next command phase, each time model in that unit makes an attack, you can re-roll the hit roll. If that unit is core, you can also re-roll the wound roll. This is an absolutely fantastic ability because it allows you to fully supercharge one unit a turn. Now, I know what some of you are going to be saying, but Mordian Glory, what about his reroll ones to hit and to wound aura? That's pretty good for all those core units. That is true, but what you've got to remember is that if you're just plugging this guy into your list because you want a bubble of reroll ones to hit, there are actually better, cheaper ways of doing that in your book. What you've got to remember is the Lord Solar costs 170 points. He isn't cheap. If you're looking for a source of reroll ones to hit and to wound for your infantry, you're better off taking a Cadian Castellan and a command squad because that's going to come in at 125 points and do exactly the same job. Heck, they can even do the same number of orders as the Lord Solar can do, but again, for about 45 points cheaper. So like I said, the main reason you want to include this guy in your list is you want access to something that is unique, not something you can get elsewhere for cheaper. And the thing that this guy can do that no other unit in your army can do is hand out full rerolls to hit and rerolls to wound to a unit each turn. And this leads me on to my next two golden rules. He is not a plug and play unit, and you must have a plan for the Lord Solar. A plug and play unit is one that you can chuck into your army list, and no matter the mission and no matter the opponent or army list that you end up facing off against, it will always able to perform well and do its intended battlefield role. An example of this is the plug and play tank commander that I've talked about previously on this channel. Now, if you haven't seen that video, don't worry, I'll link it at the end of this one. But I'll quickly summarize what the plug and play tank commander is now to give a bit more context to the example. This tactic is where you take a tank commander, you upgrade it with the tank ace veteran commandeer, and you give it the extra regimental doctrine elite sharpshooters. This gives it one free reroll a turn, which means that you can get a full reroll to hit on that Vanquisher cannon every single turn. This makes the Vanquisher cannon much more reliable and means that it's likely to hit with that one big shot. The reason this unit and tactic is a plug and play one is because it doesn't matter what mission you're playing, it doesn't matter what opponent you're going against, no one wants to be hit by a Vanquisher cannon that's got an inbuilt reroll to hit. It's always going to be good. There's always going to be a unit on the battlefield that you're going to be able to sling one of those big anti-tank rounds into and do significant damage to. It is a perfect take-all-comers unit. That's why it's plug and play. The Lord Solar is not a plug and play unit because if you just chuck him in your list and you're not really thinking about where those full rerolls from the Lord Commander Solar ability are going to go, you'll end up finding he's just like giving out full rerolls to a squad of infantry or something crazy each turn. He won't be getting the most bang for his buck from the main reason you are taking him, which means you must have a plan for the Lord Solar. That means that when you are including him in your list, think about what units he is going to be giving those full rerolls out to each turn. And what I'm going to do now, guys, is give you some examples of those units that really do benefit from those full Lord Solar rerolls. Now, unit number one is actually going to be two units. It's Kazakin or Scions. Both of these units really benefit from the full rerolls to hit from the Lord Solar. And the reason for this is because they have access to a stratagem called Overcharged Las Cells. Overcharged Las Cells means that for each 6 you get to wound, you do a mortal wound in addition to your regular damage. But also don't forget that Born Soldiers which is your most common regimental doctrine, says that if you get a 6 to hit, that counts as an auto wound, and that auto wound counts as having rolled a 6 to wound. So it also triggers overcharged las cells. So if you take a unit of Scions or Kazakin and you give them first rank fire, second rank fire to get the maximum number of las shots out of that unit, and maybe you give them some hotshot volley guns as well, they're going to have loads and loads of opportunities to trigger overcharged las cells and to do lots of mortal wounds to your opponent. So if you're thinking of including lots of Kazakin or Scions in your guard army, it's a good idea to also include the Lord Solar, because you'll have a plan and a good place for his full rerolls every single turn. A couple of little side notes to mention when it comes to Kazakin and Scions. Firstly, don't forget that they are core, so they will benefit from his heroic senior officer reroll 1s to hit, reroll 1s to wound aura, which is great. And also, because they are core, that when they get the Lord Commander Solar rerolls put on them, they get not only the rerolls to hit, but they also get the rerolls to wound. So they really do benefit very strongly from the Lord Commander Solar's influence, and that's why it's great to pair those units up together. Another unit that the Lord Solar pairs really well with, and is a great one to include in your plan for using him, is Rough Riders. Rough Riders are probably our best combat unit in the book right now, and the reason they pair so well with the Supreme Commander is because they have the core keyword. Not only does this allow them to benefit from the passive heroic senior officer reroll 1s to hit, reroll 1s to wound aura of the Lord Solar, but they also get the full supercharge from the Lord Commander Solar ability. They get the full rerolls to hit and the full rerolls to wound. This opens up a couple of interesting options for how you can use your Rough Riders on the battlefield. Either you could take a big 10-man squad or multiple big 10-man squads, supercharge them up with that ability, with all those rerolls, and then launch at the enemy, charge them down and do massive damage to them. Or you can use some smaller squads as really potent counter-attack units. How the second option works is you take 1 or 2 small units of Rough Riders, just 5 cavalry in each unit. These 5-man units are much more maneuverable than the big 10-man magic missile blocks, and much easier to hide out of line of sight, which keeps them safe until you need them. And when you do need them, let's say when an enemy assault unit has contacted your lines and started chopping up your guardsmen, your Lord Solar can turn around, give them the full rerolls, and then they can go off and deal with that enemy combat unit. Side note, I would consider the countercharge Rough Riders to be more of a plan B for the Lord Solar, maybe a secondary target for those rerolls. There will be games when you don't encounter enemy assault units. You might be playing Tau or another shooting army, at which point you're going to need other units that can really benefit from those full rerolls. So it's still good to include 1 or 2 units of Rough Riders in your army when you're taking a Lord Solar, but make sure you're including other things like Kazakin and some of the other units we're going to discuss to be the primary target for those full rerolls. Another unit that pairs incredibly well with the Lord Solar is the Rogel Dawn Battle Tank. Because the Rogel Dawn has the Battle Tank keyword, it can benefit from the Lord Commander Solar full rerolls. But what you've got to remember is it's not core, so it only gets the rerolls to hit, not also the full rerolls to wound. But despite the fact it doesn't get the rerolls to wound, it really benefits from the Lord Commander Solar's rerolls to hit, because it has so many guns that you can strap onto it. You can get a Rogel Dawn to put out an average of 36 shots a turn. How, you ask? Take it with the Oppressor Cannon, so it gets D6 plus 3 shots from its main gun for an average of 7, and it also gets an autocannon as part of that turret as well, so that is 9 shots there. You can then also combine that with the Castigated Gatling Cannon, which gets 12 shots, which means that suddenly the Rogel Dawn is putting out 21 shots. Then you can put 3 stubbers on it, which puts it up to 30 shots. And then you can put 2 heavy bolts on it, which puts it up to 36 shots. That is a hell of a lot of DACA from one vehicle. All of it getting full rerolls to hit. You take all this DACA, combine it with the full rerolls, combine it with Born Soldiers, and then take it a step further and spend 1 command point for Ingrained Precision, which means that instead of auto wounding on 6s to hit, you auto wound on 5s to hit. And you're looking at a Rogel Dawn that can put out 18 auto wounds a turn. And on top of that, a whole bunch of regular wounds as well. The Rogal Dawn is actually my favorite unit to pair with Leontus because it's a tough unit and therefore it's going to be around most of the game. The problem with pairing it with, let's say, Kazakin or Rough Riders is they're quite fragile. Your Rough Riders might all be dead by the end of turn 3. Same for your Kazakin and your Scions. If the opponent's got good target priority, you might pick all those fragile infantry up fairly quickly. But the Rogal Dawn is a tough cookie, and you've got ways of making it even tougher via stratagems as well. So that means that every single turn, your Lord Solar has got a very viable target for his full rerolls. So that's why I think these two pair really well. They're actually relatively cost effective as well. If you're taking multiple squads of Rough Riders, you could be looking at 500, 600 points just for the Rough Riders and then the Lord Solar on top. That is a hell of a commitment, and your whole army plan and game plan is going to have to be built around those big waves of Rough Riders going at the enemy. Likewise with the Kazakin, you're looking at least 300 points if you want to get the most out of that, and then the Lord Solar on top of that. You might even be looking at more than that, because you're going to want to have a good target for the rerolls every turn. If you're losing at least one squad every turn, you might need 5 or 6 squads of Kazakin and Scions, at which point, again, you're looking at 600 points, plus the Lord Solar. A lot of your game plans, again, going to be centered around this idea, but with the Rogal Dawn, it's much more plug and play. A Rogal Dawn with all the DACA is like 270, 275 points. Not that expensive. And then you combine the Lord Soul on top of that, and you're looking at a combination that's about 400 points. In some cases, that is about half what you're having to spend on the other combos. So I actually think that the Rogal Dawn and the Lord Solar pair really well. And individually, those units aren't very plug and play. But when you put them together, that is a combination that you can plug into any guard army and it'll be effective. That's how you get the Lord Solar to be a plug and play unit. You combine him with a Rogal Dawn with a DACA loadout. Now that covers the top 3 units that I would pair with the Lord Solar, but I do have 2 honourable mentions. The first honourable mention is Sentinels. Sentinels are very cheap and spammable, and that means it's fairly easy to take 9 of them and bubble wrap them around the Lord Solar. If these are armor Sentinels, it gives him a really durable screen, but also, thanks to the fact that Sentinels have got the core keyword, they will benefit from his heroic senior officer aura. Reroll once to hit, reroll once to wound. On top of this, the Lord Solar can order the Sentinels as well, which means they can give them take aim, giving them +1 to hit on top of this. Now, because they have the core keyword, they also do benefit from the full weight of the Lord Commander Solar rerolls. That means for each turn, you could give one of those Sentinels 4 rerolls to hit and 4 rerolls to wound. Now, unlike the Rogal Dawn, where it is very tough, but if it goes down, there isn't really another good target for those rerolls. If a unit of Sentinels go down, you still got 2 other units which you can go, right, well, I'll give those guys 4 rerolls then instead. So it gives you a little bit more redundancy. Each one of those units of Sentinels doesn't have as much firepower as a Rogal Dawn, but there are layers of redundancy, which means that you should be able to get good use out of those 4 rerolls throughout the entire game. The other honourable mention is Bulgrins and Ogrins. Now, these big lads don't actually benefit from the Lord Commander Solar rerolls or even the Heroic Senior Officer aura. But they do benefit from the Commanding Authority special rule, which allows Leonidas to issue regimental orders to your abhumans. This would mean that you could issue take aim or fixed bayonets to your Ogrins or Bulgrins, something that no other character in the game can do. Being able to issue fixed bayonets to a unit of Bulgrins really boosts their power. It gets them up to hitting on 2s, and it means those Bulgrin mauls are actually AP -2. That massively increases their ability to actually Barney in close combat, even with other dedicated combat units. It takes Bulgrins from just being a tanky meat shield to an actually scary combat beatstick. Now that covers the units and the honourable mentions, but I just want to take this one step further by pointing out that those things we've just talked about, they're not mutually exclusive. They all can be used as part of this plan to get the most out of the Lord Solar. For example, you could take a unit of Kazakin and turn 1, give them the full rerolls from the Lord Commander Solar, send them off and use them as a Kazakin bomb. They then die. That's fine, because guess what? You've also included a Rogal Dawn in your list, which then going forward for turns 2 onwards benefits from those full rerolls. But you've also taken some Armored Sentinels, and they bubble wrap around your Lord Commander Solar. Now, if the Rogal Dawn goes down, great, you've got another valid target for those full rerolls. But if the Rogal Dawn doesn't go down and happily benefits from the big supercharge the whole game, the Sentinels don't mind, because the whole game they've also been benefiting from the heroic senior officer aura. So you see how we've combined 3 different units there together, and it means that your Lord Solar, no matter what happens, has always got something he can buff, and there's always a plan in place to get the most out of him. But that's it for today's video. Let me know what you think down in the comment section below. Have you got any other units that you think combine really well with the Lord Solar, or any other golden rules that you think are really important to keep in mind when you're including this guy in your list? Let me know down in that comment section below. If you enjoyed today's video, make sure you smash that like button and also subscribe to never miss an episode. If you really enjoyed today's video or you found it particularly helpful, then please consider becoming a channel member or Patreon supporter. It is thanks to the generous support of the channel members and patrons that I'm able to do this gig full time now, and that allows me to put more effort into every single video. One of the big benefits of becoming a channel member or Patreon supporter is you gain access to the Mordian Glory Discord, which is an online community of over 800 active members. It has really exploded over the last few months, and there's always someone to talk to about tactics, memes, hobbying, painting, and everything 40k. So if that sounds like a whole load of fun, or maybe a useful resource, we do have a lot of experienced players in there, then please consider becoming a channel member or Patreon supporter and getting yourself in that Discord. And I just want to take a moment now to say a big thank you to all of the latest supporters. So thank you to Apslar, Sean Stansney, Martin Francis, A Nameless Name, Stephen Smith, Range85, Dave Ingram, Aaron Schmetzer, and Quark007. Thank you guys for becoming channel members. Thank you for doing your part. And I also want to do a shout out to the latest Patreon supporters as well. So a big thank you to Joseph Crystal, Alex McDonough, Husky601, Eric Jackson, and Josh S. Thank you for your ongoing Patreon support. And last but certainly not least, I want to say a big thank you to my top tier Patreon supporters. These are the War Masters, the people that have truly gone above and beyond the Call of Duty. So a massive thank you and an 07 down in the comment section for Bonbon Vert, Phil French, Ross Miller, Tekwile, Alex Dengal, John Stubbs, Nick Walsh, Swordfish Trombone, Diesel Fox, Tom Sutton, and August Varney. Thank you guys for your very generous support. It is a big reason of how I'm able to do Mordian Glory full time now. So thank you so much. I hope you all enjoyed today's video. Thank you for watching. And of course, as always, I'll see you guys next time.